328 at the UK Vanguard Nationals for Standard, and I play Knight Medals. So my main card of the deck is four copies of Knight Medal Carol. This is the main card of the deck. It's really good for filtering and like getting your other resources. And even if you don't see a grade 3 Workeroid, it helps for later plays. And its bottom effect is if a grade 3 goes to Soul, you can count +1 and discard a 2 and rewrite a Workeroid from Soul, which is really good because you get more Excel circles to use for later plays, and that's why this card's really good for the deck. My second grade 3 I play is 4 copies of Knight Medal Carol, Alice. This grade 3 is really good for having used Carol's effect, as it will go to the Soul when you use its effect to call another card out, which will extend your plays even further. And its Vanguard effect to call a Workeroid is also good because you can do like other filter plays like Jill. You can use Jill, which is really good for this deck, and you even can call out another Alice, which would help even more for the deck, and that's why I play it. I run 2 copies of Calamity Chimera. It's just good, like Soul Blast 1, Mover, Rearguard the Soul. You can countercharge 1 to help with your other plays, and you can use it for Carol turns, which is why it's good. I run 3 copies of Amarath. It's kind of like, it's the same with Calamity Chimera, just moving grade 3 cards to Soul to use for Carol's effect, and also just moving them into Soul for other cards to use, such as Trapezis. I run 4 copies of Jumping Jill. With this card, I really didn't use this effect a lot, but at the event, I really didn't see it as much. But when I did see it, it really helped for bolstering my turns. It's just good for using its effect to call out more units, and it's just calling another column with this and Trapezis. Like, they work really well together, and it's just really good and key, and since it's obviously a Workeroid, and it's really good for the Knight Medal deck. I run 4 copies of Juggler. This card filters is really good, and even if I was to look at the top 2 and get a trigger, for example, even if I'd had to put 2 trigger to Soul, it's still good for Soul Blast fodder for Alice or other effects. So that's why this card's really good, and it's like probably the main grade 2 ride that you would ride. For grade 1s, I run 3 Trapezis. At first, I wasn't really running this because I actually also forgot about this card as well, and it's just really good. Like, if you haven't seen a grade 3 from Carol's effect and you can move this to Soul, you can call out a grade 3, so you can use another effect to put the Carol grade 3 to Soul for this effect to activate. So that's why this card's good. It's really helpful at the tournament. Like, most of my plays come from this card, and that's why this card's really good. I'm running this card called Knight Medal Beverly. It was from the new set. This card's really good for powering up Carol. So the main thing you would do with this is call it behind the Carol Vanguard, so it can gain power when it rides on top of it, since you're going to be riding multiple times. Every time you ride a Workeroid, it's going to gain 5,000 power, which helps against matchups such as 4 stacks, for example, because even if you didn't have this, it wouldn't have been able to hit if you hit a trigger, but you can now hit even if you don't hit, even if you hit a trigger, because of this effect to give it power. And it's an important deck since it's obviously a Knight Medal and it works well. I run 3 copies of Starting Presenter. This card was actually really helpful. Like, I moved Carols from my hand to the Soul to get ready for later plays. And just for the fact of being able to do early pressure of calling cards from the Soul is really good for this deck, as in the later game it has more chance of losing rather than winning against aggro matchups such as Hitachi High Roll, Hyuga, and things like that, and that's why I run this card. I run 3 copies of Midnight Bunny. This card actually basically won one of my games. It was against the God Hand matchup. It was this and a front trigger that won me the game, as that column hit. I used Bunny's effect to call an Alice, and then I used Alice's effect to move Alice to Soul and do a carol turn, which really helped in that game because I really did think I was going to lose that game, and it's just a really good card for soul charging in general. So for my trigger lineup, I run the standard of 4 heals because 4 heals. I run 4 draw trigger PGs because draw trigger PGs, and they're good for drawing in general. At the time, I was playing 6 draw. I didn't like 6 draw. 4 draws I think is enough. And yeah, for tech, I run 2 crits just for pressure because I was running 8 front at first and it worked well, but I feel like since they'd be on 4, they could just take the damage because they'd probably be no crits in deck. But with these, it'd be more helpful if I had crits. I did try 8 crit, but 8 crit didn't work as well because the columns were weaker because we didn't have enough power in the deck. So 2 crits enough. And then I play 6 front. Front triggers in this deck really help the deck a lot since the columns are normally just weak columns. But with front triggers, they power up the columns even more so they can hit. And front triggers are really good. And then lastly, I run this starter. It's better starter out of the 2, and that's why I run it. And that's Night Meadows.